In the ruins of an ancient city, archaeologists found something that shouldn't exist. 44 human skeletons scattered across the streets. Not buried, not honored, just frozen in time. Some were holding hands. Others covered their faces. Many appeared to be running. And here's the thing that still makes scientists uncomfortable. They all died at the exact same moment, instantly. 4,000 years ago. No weapons, no signs of violence, no plague, just sudden, absolute death. But that's not even the strangest part. The stones beneath their bodies had melted, fused together by heat so intense, so impossibly extreme, that modern science struggles to explain it. Some researchers whisper a theory so controversial, so disturbing, that most academics won't even entertain it. What if these people didn't die from disease or war as we know it? What if they witnessed something we thought was impossible in the ancient world? What if Mohenjo-Daro was destroyed by a nuclear blast, thousands of years before we split the atom? The year is 1922. The British Empire still casts its shadow across India. Archaeologist R.D. Banerjee is surveying the Sindh province, now part of modern Pakistan, when he stumbles upon something extraordinary buried beneath centuries of dirt and silence. Massive brick structures, sophisticated street grids, advanced drainage systems, an entire city, perfectly preserved under the earth, waiting to tell its story. They called it Mohenjo-Daro. In the local Sindhi language, it means Mound of the Dead. How fitting that name would turn out to be. This wasn't just any ancient settlement. Mohenjo-Daro was one of the crown jewels of the Indus Valley Civilization, one of humanity's oldest and most advanced cultures. While Egypt built pyramids and Mesopotamia carved cuneiform tablets, the people of the Indus Valley were engineering cities that wouldn't look out of place in the modern world. Picture this. Around 2500 BC, when most of humanity lived in crude villages, Mohenjo-Daro stood as a testament to human ingenuity. Streets laid out in perfect grids, two-story houses with indoor plumbing, public baths with sophisticated drainage, standardized brick sizes, granaries that could feed thousands. The city sprawled across nearly 250 acres and housed an estimated 35,000 people at its peak. These weren't primitive people scratching survival from the dirt. These were urban planners, engineers, artists, and traders who built a society that rivaled anything in the ancient world. But here's what makes Mohenjo-Daro different from every other ancient city. It has no temples, no palaces, no monuments to warrior kings, no weapons of war scattered in the ruins. It's as if the people who built this place had somehow transcended the violence and ego that defined most ancient civilizations. They created something almost utopian, a society built on trade and cooperation rather than conquest and domination. For roughly 700 years, Mohenjo-Daro thrived. Markets bustled with merchants trading jewelry, textiles, and pottery. Children played in the streets. Families gathered in courtyards. Life flowed like the Indus River itself, constant and abundant. And then, around 1900 BC, something happened. Something so catastrophic, so complete, that it erased this magnificent civilization almost overnight. The Indus Valley Civilization didn't decline slowly. It didn't fade into history through invasion or economic collapse. It simply vanished. When archaeologists first explored Mohenjo-Daro in the 1920s and 30s, they expected to find the usual signs of a city's end: invasion layers, fire damage from war, mass graves from disease, evidence of social collapse. Instead, they found a mystery that still haunts us today. The excavation team worked slowly, carefully brushing away millennia of dust. Standard archaeological procedure. Document everything. Preserve context. Expect the ordinary. Then they found the first skeleton, then another, then another. By the time the initial surveys concluded, they'd uncovered 44 human remains scattered throughout the ancient streets and buildings. And everything about these skeletons screamed wrong. First, the positions. These people hadn't been buried with the care and ritual that defined virtually every ancient culture. They weren't in cemeteries or tombs. They were just there, lying in the streets, sprawled in doorways, collapsed in their homes. Some skeletons were found in small groups, bodies touching, as if families had gathered together in their final moments. One group appeared to be holding hands. Another showed a parent shielding a child. These were people who died suddenly, without warning, without time to run or hide or even understand what was happening. But here's where it gets truly bizarre. There were no signs of trauma, no broken bones from violence, no cut marks from weapons, no arrows lodged in ribs, no crushed skulls from falling debris. Whatever killed these people didn't leave a mark. It just stopped them, instantly, like someone flipping a switch from life to death. The British archaeologist Sir John Marshall, who led the early excavations, noted something in his reports that would echo through the decades. The occurrence of the skeletons in such unusual positions and circumstances suggests some sudden catastrophe. But what kind of catastrophe kills people instantly without leaving physical trauma? What ancient force could freeze an entire population in place? The excavation team photographed, measured, and documented everything. They noted that many skeletons showed an unusual level of preservation, as if the bodies had been subjected to intense heat that had partially calcified the bones. And then they found something that shouldn't exist in the ancient world: glass. Not manufactured glass beads or jewelry, which the Indus people certainly made. This was different. Scattered throughout certain areas of Mohenjo-Daro, particularly near where some skeletons were found, they discovered fragments of fused, melted material, black stones that had been transformed into glass-like substances, pottery that had been vitrified, melted and re-hardened into strange glassy shapes. Clay and sand fused together at temperatures that shouldn't have been achievable in 2000 BC. To create this kind of vitrification, you need temperatures exceeding 1,500 degrees Celsius. That's hotter than any kiln or forge the ancient world possessed. That's the kind of heat you find in volcanic eruptions or modern industrial furnaces, or nuclear explosions. But surely that's impossible, right? Nuclear weapons didn't exist until 1945. The Manhattan Project, Oppenheimer, the Trinity test. That's when humanity first unleashed the atom. Yet here, in the ruins of a city that died 4,000 years ago, archaeologists found evidence of heat so intense it turned stone into glass. The mystery deepened with every discovery. Why were these people not buried? Why did they die so suddenly? And what could possibly generate enough heat to vitrify stone in the ancient world? For decades, mainstream archaeology filed Mohenjo-Daro away with a comfortable explanation. The city declined due to environmental changes, shifting rivers, or gradual abandonment. The skeletons were late-period inhabitants who died during the final days of the city, perhaps from disease or flood. Case closed. Mystery solved. Nothing to see here. But not everyone was satisfied with that answer, because the evidence kept whispering something else, something uncomfortable, something that challenged everything we thought we knew about the capabilities of the ancient world. In 1979, an Italian researcher named David Davenport arrived in Mohenjo-Daro with a radical theory and the determination to prove it. Davenport wasn't a conventional archaeologist. He was more of an investigator, someone willing to look where others refused to see. He'd spent years studying the site reports, the photographs, the scattered references in academic papers that mentioned the unusual nature of the skeletons and the vitrified materials. And he'd noticed something that others had dismissed or overlooked. The pattern of destruction wasn't random, it was focused. Davenport surveyed the entire archaeological site, mapping out where the vitrified materials were concentrated, where the heat damage was most severe, where the skeletons were found, and what he discovered made his blood run cold. There was an epicenter, a ground zero. At the heart of Mohenjo-Daro, he identified a roughly circular area about 50 yards across where the destruction was most intense. Buildings in this area had been completely leveled, reduced to rubble and scattered bricks. The heat damage was most severe here, with stones showing the highest degree of vitrification. Moving outward from this central point, the damage decreased in a radial pattern, exactly as you'd expect from an explosion. With a single point of origin, Davenport collected samples of the vitrified materials and sent them to laboratories for analysis. The results confirmed his suspicions. These materials had been subjected to incredibly high temperatures, far beyond anything a conventional fire or natural disaster could produce. Some samples showed evidence of temperatures exceeding 2,000 degrees Celsius. That's hot enough to melt iron, hot enough to turn sand into glass instantly. But here's where Davenport's theory took a sharp turn into controversial territory. He began comparing the destruction pattern at Mohenjo-Daro to modern nuclear test sites. The similarities were striking. The epicenter of destruction, the radial pattern of damage, the vitrified materials, the instant death without physical trauma. Even the positions of the skeletons, frozen mid-action, resembled the shadow people of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, victims who were vaporized or killed so quickly by the atomic blast that they left permanent shadows on walls. Davenport published his findings in a book titled Atomic Destruction in 2000 BC. In it, he made the bold claim that Mohenjo-Daro had been destroyed by an ancient atomic weapon, either an accident or an act of warfare that wiped out one of humanity's greatest early civilizations. The academic world responded with predictable skepticism, dismissing Davenport as a fringe theorist, a sensationalist looking for attention. But he wasn't finished presenting evidence. He pointed to measurements allegedly taken at the site showing elevated radiation levels in certain areas, particularly near the epicenter. Now, this claim has been hotly contested, with many archaeologists saying no credible radiation surveys were ever conducted or that background radiation levels were normal. But Davenport insisted that the data existed, even if it had been suppressed or ignored. Then there were the skeletons themselves. When Davenport examined the reports from the original excavations, he noted that many of the skeletons showed an unusual feature. They had higher than normal levels of radioactivity. Again, this claim is disputed. Some scientists argue that any elevated radiation could be explained by natural sources, the breakdown of uranium or thorium in the surrounding soil over thousands of years. But Davenport argued the levels were too high, too concentrated to be natural. He also pointed to the curious fact that much of the skeletal remains had simply disappeared or been poorly preserved by modern standards. The British excavators in the 1920s and 30s didn't have the preservation techniques we use today. Many bones crumbled when exposed to air. Others were stored improperly and degraded over time. Convenient, Davenport suggested, for those who didn't want the skeletons examined with modern technology that might reveal uncomfortable truths. But Davenport's most compelling evidence, at least to those willing to listen, came from an unexpected source: ancient texts. He turned his attention to the Mahabharata, one of the great epic poems of ancient India. Written in Sanskrit and dating back thousands of years, the Mahabharata tells the story of a great war between rival kingdoms, filled with heroes, gods, and divine weapons. Most scholars treat the Mahabharata as mythology, beautiful poetry and allegory, but not historical fact. Davenport read it differently. He saw it as a distorted memory of real events, passed down through oral tradition and eventually written down, with the details mythologized but the core truth preserved. And what he found in those ancient verses chilled him. The Mahabharata describes weapons of unimaginable power. The Brahmastra, the weapon of Brahma. The text describes it being unleashed in battle, creating devastation that sounds eerily like a nuclear explosion. Listen to these translations from the ancient Sanskrit: a single projectile charged with all the power of the universe. An incandescent column of smoke and flame as bright as 10,000 suns rose in all its splendor. It was an unknown weapon, an iron thunderbolt, a gigantic messenger of death, which reduced to ashes the entire race. The corpses were so burned as to be unrecognizable hair, and nails fell out. Pottery broke without apparent cause, and the birds turned white. After a few hours, all foodstuffs were infected. To escape from this fire, the soldiers threw themselves in streams to wash themselves and their equipment. These descriptions sound less like mythology and more like eyewitness accounts of atomic warfare. The blinding flash, the mushroom cloud, the radiation sickness causing hair loss, the contamination of food and water, the desperate attempt to wash away radiation. Davenport argued that the Mahabharata, along with other ancient Indian texts like the Ramayana, preserved the memory of an ancient nuclear war, and Mohenjo-Daro was one of its casualties. Critics pointed out the obvious. These texts were written thousands of years after the supposed events, mixing history with mythology in ways that make factual extraction nearly impossible. The weapons described could be poetic exaggerations of conventional warfare, or natural phenomena like volcanoes and lightning strikes, interpreted through a mythological lens. But supporters of the ancient nuclear war theory continued to accumulate what they saw as corroborating evidence. They pointed to other sites around the world where vitrified stone has been found. Ancient forts in Scotland, ruins in the Middle East, mysterious glass deposits in the Libyan desert. Could all of these be evidence of ancient high-energy events? They noted that the Indus Valley Civilization's disappearance was remarkably sudden and complete, unlike the gradual decline typical of most ancient cultures. One moment, a thriving civilization. The next, silence. They highlighted the lack of mass graves, invasion layers, or evidence of the usual causes of civilizational collapse. It was as if the people didn't die from war, famine, or disease, but from something else entirely. And they kept coming back to those 44 skeletons lying in the streets of Mohenjo-Daro, frozen in their final moments, killed by something that left no mark but ended their lives in an instant. In the years since Davenport's research, others have taken up the investigation. Amateur researchers, independent scientists, and a few brave academics willing to risk their reputations have examined the evidence from different angles. Some have used computer modeling to simulate different types of disasters, trying to recreate the pattern of destruction seen at Mohenjo-Daro. Could an earthquake create this pattern? A flood? A fire? A volcanic eruption? None of the conventional explanations perfectly matched the evidence. But a high-altitude airburst explosion, like a nuclear weapon detonated above the city, fit almost perfectly. Others have focused on the vitrified materials, conducting more sophisticated analysis than was available in Davenport's time. While some samples can be explained by intense but conventional fires, others show characteristics that remain difficult to account for without temperatures exceeding anything the ancient world should have been able to produce. The most recent examinations using techniques like thermoluminescence dating and electron microscopy have revealed that some of the vitrified materials at Mohenjo-Daro were indeed subjected to extremely rapid heating and cooling, consistent with an explosive event rather than a sustained fire. But here's the problem with all this research. Access to the site is limited, and much of the original archaeological evidence is either lost, scattered in museums around the world, or was never properly preserved in the first place. The skeletons that could potentially answer so many questions have largely disappeared. Some were damaged during the original excavations, others were stored improperly and crumbled. A few remain in museum collections, but attempts to conduct modern testing, including radiocarbon dating and DNA analysis, have been limited. It's as if the mystery of Mohenjo-Daro is designed to remain unsolved, with just enough evidence to spark curiosity, but never quite enough to reach a definitive conclusion. So what really happened at Mohenjo-Daro? Let's examine the competing theories, from the conventional to the controversial, and see where the evidence leads us. Theory 1. Natural decline and abandonment. This is the mainstream archaeological position, the safe answer found in textbooks and museum displays. According to this theory, Mohenjo-Daro and the broader Indus Valley Civilization declined gradually over several centuries due to environmental changes. The Indus River may have shifted its course, cutting off the city's water supply and trade routes. Climate change could have brought drought or floods. The soil might have become too saline for agriculture over time. People simply left, seeking better opportunities elsewhere. The 44 skeletons, according to this view, were stragglers, the last inhabitants of a dying city who succumbed to disease or malnutrition during the final years. The unusual positions don't indicate sudden death, but rather the natural disarray of bodies that weren't properly buried during a time of social collapse. As for the vitrified materials, conventional archaeology explains them as the result of intense but ordinary fires. When a city is abandoned, wooden structures decay and can catch fire naturally. If enough material burns in one place, temperatures can reach levels high enough to melt and fuse certain materials. This theory has the advantage of requiring no extraordinary claims. It fits within our understanding of how ancient civilizations rose and fell. It's tidy, reasonable, and doesn't challenge any fundamental assumptions about the past. But it has problems. The environmental changes proposed to explain the Indus Valley's collapse don't appear dramatic enough to cause such a rapid, complete abandonment. Other civilizations faced similar challenges and either adapted or declined slowly over generations. Why was the Indus Valley different? And the fires that supposedly created the vitrified materials should have left extensive ash layers, burned wood, and other clear evidence of conflagration. These signs are largely absent at Mohenjo-Daro. The vitrification appears isolated, localized, not the result of a citywide fire. And most troubling for this theory is the condition of the skeletons. Disease and malnutrition don't kill people in the positions these bodies were found. The careful analysis of their postures suggests sudden, simultaneous death, not the gradual wasting away of a starving population. Theory 2. Massive flood. Some researchers have proposed that Mohenjo-Daro was destroyed by a catastrophic flood, perhaps caused by an earthquake-induced dam upstream that later burst, sending a wall of water down the Indus River. This could explain the sudden death of the inhabitants, caught off guard by the rushing water. It might account for bodies found in unusual positions, swept up and deposited by the flood. And it fits with geological evidence showing that the Indus Valley experienced several major flooding events. The vitrified materials, according to this theory, predate the flood and come from earlier periods of the city's occupation, unrelated to its final destruction. But here's the problem. Flood victims show distinctive patterns. Bodies are swept downstream, piled against obstacles, mixed with massive amounts of sediment and debris. The Mohenjo-Daro skeletons don't show this pattern. They're scattered but not displaced in the way you'd expect from a violent flood. Moreover, the city's sophisticated drainage system was designed to handle flooding. The entire urban layout suggests the inhabitants understood and managed the river's seasonal variations. Would they have been caught so completely off guard? And a flood doesn't explain the epicenter of destruction that Davenport identified, or the radial pattern of damage spreading outward from that central point. Theory 3. Epidemic disease. Could a plague have wiped out Mohenjo-Daro's population? History is full of diseases that devastated ancient cities, from the plague of Athens to the Black Death. An epidemic could kill quickly and explain why bodies weren't properly buried. If the disease struck fast enough and killed indiscriminately, social structures might collapse before burial rites could be performed. The problem with this theory is that epidemic diseases don't kill everyone simultaneously. Plagues have patterns. Initial cases, spreading infection, peak mortality, eventual decline. You'd expect to see evidence of this progression, perhaps mass graves, desperate attempts at burial, signs of social breakdown over days or weeks. The Mohenjo-Daro skeletons suggest something different. Instantaneous death, people frozen mid-action, no evidence of the progression of disease. And no epidemic explains the vitrified materials or the pattern of heat damage throughout the site. Theory 4. Military conquest. Could Mohenjo-Daro have been destroyed by invasion? The Indus Valley Civilization had no walls, no weapons caches, no obvious military infrastructure. Perhaps this made them vulnerable to a more warlike culture. Some scholars have suggested that Indo-Aryan tribes, migrating into the region around the time of the Indus Valley's collapse, could have conquered and destroyed the cities. But there's a glaring problem. Where's the evidence? Ancient warfare leaves unmistakable traces: arrowheads, sword cuts on bones, burned gates, defensive walls hastily erected, mass graves filled with the young men who fought to defend their homes. Mohenjo-Daro has none of this. The skeletons show no trauma from weapons. There are no signs of battle, no evidence of conquest. And what invading army has a weapon that kills instantly without leaving a mark and generates enough heat to turn stone into glass? Theory 5. Volcanic event. Could a volcanic eruption or related phenomenon explain the evidence? Volcanoes can certainly generate the kind of heat needed to create vitrified materials. Pyroclastic flows, the superheated gas and rock that race down a volcano's slopes, can reach temperatures of 1,000 degrees Celsius or more. If a volcano erupted somewhere in the region, it might have sent a pyroclastic surge toward Mohenjo-Daro, instantly killing everyone in its path and melting stone. The problem? There are no volcanoes anywhere near Mohenjo-Daro. The closest volcanic activity is hundreds of miles away, far too distant for a pyroclastic flow to reach the city. Could it have been some other volcanic phenomenon, like a superheated ash cloud? Possibly, but again, where's the source? And where are the thick ash layers that would have buried the city? The geological evidence doesn't support a volcanic explanation. Theory 6. Meteorite impact. What if something fell from the sky? A meteorite impact could generate enormous heat, create a blast pattern, and kill people instantly without conventional trauma. There have been documented cases of ancient impact events. The Tunguska event in Siberia in 1908, though much more recent, showed how an aerial explosion could flatten a huge area without leaving a crater. Could something similar have happened above Mohenjo-Daro? The epicenter of destruction, the radial damage pattern, and the extreme heat all fit with an aerial explosion. If a meteorite exploded in the atmosphere above the city, it could account for much of what we see. But here's what doesn't fit. Meteorite impacts leave distinctive signatures: shocked quartz, spherules of melted material blasted into the atmosphere and falling back as tiny glass beads, unusual metallic residues. Extensive geological surveys of Mohenjo-Daro and the surrounding region have found no evidence of an impact event. No crater, no impact signatures, no meteoritic material. Could an aerial burst leave less evidence? Perhaps, but it would still leave something, and nothing has been found that definitively points to an extraterrestrial impact. Theory 7. Ancient nuclear war. Which brings us to the most controversial theory of all, the one that David Davenport championed and that continues to fascinate researchers and the public alike. What if an advanced ancient civilization, now lost to history, possessed nuclear technology? What if the Mahabharata's descriptions of divine weapons were not mythology, but distorted memories of real nuclear warfare? What if Mohenjo-Daro was destroyed by an atomic blast? The evidence, as we've seen, is circumstantial but intriguing. The pattern of destruction with a clear epicenter and radial damage spread, consistent with an explosion. Vitrified materials requiring temperatures that match nuclear detonation effects. Skeletons showing instant death without physical trauma, similar to acute radiation exposure or blast effects. Ancient texts describing weapons with characteristics eerily similar to nuclear explosions. The complete and sudden collapse of an entire civilization. Alleged elevated radiation levels at the site, though this remains disputed and unconfirmed by recent studies. Supporters of this theory argue that we're too quick to assume that technological advancement is linear, that we're the first and only civilization to reach high levels of scientific knowledge. They point to other alleged out-of-place artifacts and ancient mysteries that seem to suggest advanced knowledge in the distant past. Critics counter with the obvious. There's no evidence of the vast industrial infrastructure necessary to develop nuclear weapons. No uranium enrichment facilities, no nuclear reactors, No massive scientific establishment, no previous demonstration of the physics, chemistry, and engineering knowledge required. And if such an advanced civilization existed, where did it go? Why did it leave no other trace except this one catastrophic event? The ancient nuclear war theory requires us to accept that an entire sophisticated civilization rose to atomic age technology and then vanished completely, leaving barely a whisper in the historical record. That's a huge leap, one that most scientists aren't willing to make without far more evidence. Theory 8. Unknown. Natural phenomenon. This brings us to perhaps the most honest answer. We do not know. Maybe something happened at Mohenjo-Daro that involved natural forces we don't fully understand or rarely see. Perhaps a perfect storm of unusual conditions created a one-time event that mimicked the effects we've been examining. Could there be natural processes that generate extreme focused heat in ways we haven't documented? Could atmospheric phenomena, seismic events, or other natural forces combine in unexpected ways? The universe is full of surprises. Ball lightning, for instance, was considered impossible folklore until it was finally documented and studied. Rogue waves at sea were dismissed as sailor myths until satellite data proved they exist. Maybe the truth about Mohenjo-Daro involves something similar, a real phenomenon that we've simply never witnessed or understood in modern times. This theory has the advantage of not requiring ancient nuclear weapons or accepting unsatisfying conventional explanations that don't quite fit the evidence, but it has the disadvantage of being unfalsifiable. You can't prove or disprove something unknown, so we're left with a genuine mystery. None of the conventional explanations perfectly account for all the evidence. The extraordinary explanations require us to accept claims that challenge fundamental assumptions about history and technology. The truth about what happened at Mohenjo-Daro 4,000 years ago remains elusive, hidden somewhere between the scattered bones, the melted stones, and the ancient words that describe divine fire falling from the sky. Step back for a moment from the theories and the evidence. Put aside the debates about radiation and vitrification, and ask yourself, why does this mystery matter? Why do we care what happened to a city that died 4,000 years ago? To people whose names we'll never know, whose language we can barely decipher, whose faces have turned to dust, because Mohenjo-Daro is us. Those 44 skeletons frozen in their final moments represent something profoundly human that transcends the millennia. Imagine being there on that last day. The sun rising over the Indus River, just like it had for centuries. Merchants opening their shops, parents calling children to breakfast, craftsmen starting another day's work. Everything ordinary, everything familiar. No one knew it was the last day. No one could imagine that everything they'd built, everything they'd worked for, everything they loved would be gone by sunset. The family holding hands in death didn't wake up knowing they'd never see another dawn. The parent shielding their child died, believing, hoping that protection meant something. In that sense, Mohenjo-Daro is every city that ever fell, every civilization that ever collapsed, every moment in history when the unthinkable became real. We look at those skeletons and see ourselves. We live in cities too. We trust in the permanence of our world, the solidity of our civilization. We assume tomorrow will come just like today. Mohenjo-Daro whispers an uncomfortable truth. It doesn't always. Sometimes tomorrow is fire and destruction. Sometimes entire civilizations vanish, leaving only ruins and questions. And here's what makes the mystery even more poignant. We don't even know how to remember them properly. We can't read their complete language. We don't know their songs, their stories, their hopes, their fears. We don't know what they called themselves, or what they believed, or what they dreamed about on quiet nights. The Indus Valley Civilization built magnificently, lived prosperously, and then disappeared so completely that we can't even reconstruct their narrative. They're voiceless in history, speaking to us only through bricks and pottery and scattered bones. If the nuclear war theory is true, it adds another layer of tragedy and irony. Consider this. We split the atom in 1945, and within 75 years, we'd built enough nuclear weapons to destroy all human civilization several times over. We stand at the precipice of our own potential extinction, wielding power we barely understand, capable of turning our cities into places like Mohenjo-Daro, full of instant death and melted stone. If an ancient civilization reached this same level and destroyed itself, what does that say about the trajectory of human technological progress? Are we doomed to repeat the cycle? Does intelligence inevitably lead to self-destruction? Carl Sagan once wrote about the cosmic calendar, compressing all of universal history into a single year. In that calendar, human civilization appears in the last few seconds before midnight on December 31st. We've existed for a cosmic eye blink, and in that eye blink, we've gone from stone tools to nuclear weapons, from cave paintings to computers, from tribal villages to global civilization, but also from peace to the capability of omnicide. We can end everything now. We have that power. If Mohenjo-Daro was destroyed by ancient atomic fire, then someone else stood where we stand now, 4,000 years ago. They made choices. They wielded power. And they left nothing but ruins and radiation and stories dismissed as myth. Even if the nuclear theory is false, even if Mohenjo-Daro fell to something mundane like floods or disease, the lesson remains. Nothing is permanent. The mightiest civilizations crumble. The most advanced cultures vanish. Pride comes before the fall, every single time. The Indus Valley people probably believed they'd last forever. Their cities were sophisticated, their trade networks extensive, their quality of life high. Why would it ever end? But it did. Suddenly. Completely. We believe the same about our civilization. We assume we're too advanced to collapse, too interconnected to fail, too smart to make civilization-ending mistakes. Mohenjo-Daro says otherwise. Those ruins say, we were here. We built greatness. And now we're dust. You will be too. That's not pessimism, it's perspective. It's the reminder that time grinds everything to powder, that civilizations are temporary, that even our mightiest works will someday be archaeological mysteries for people we can't imagine. But here's the strange comfort in that dark truth. It also means we're connected across time to everyone who ever lived and built, and hoped and feared. The person lying in a Mohenjo-Daro street 4,000 years ago felt the same things you feel. Loved their family, worked hard, wanted a better tomorrow. Their tomorrow never came. But the fact that we care enough to dig up their bones and wonder about their fate means something. It means they're not entirely gone. It means memory, however fragmentary, persists. We're doing for them what we hope future people might do for us if our civilization falls. We're trying to understand. We're trying to piece together what happened. We're trying to honor their existence by solving the mystery of their end. Maybe that's the real significance of Mohenjo-Daro. Not whether they had nuclear weapons, or fell to floods, or succumbed to disease, but that we care enough to ask, that we're moved by their tragedy, that across 4,000 years of silence, they still speak to something in us. The greatest mystery isn't how they died, it's what it means to die as a civilization, to have everything you built crumble into archaeological layers, to have your voice silenced so completely that future people debate whether you even had the technology you clearly did. The Indus Valley people were sophisticated urban engineers. That's not debatable, they had advanced knowledge. But because they're gone and we can't read their full records, people actually argue about what they could and couldn't do. What will future archaeologists argue about concerning us if our civilization falls? Will they look at our ruins and debate whether we really had computers or space flight? Will they dismiss our achievements as impossible for primitive people of the 21st century? Will they find our skeletons in unusual positions and create theories about how we died, never quite sure, never quite able to prove what happened? Mohenjo-Daro is a mirror. It shows us our own fragility, our own hubris, our own inevitable end. But it also shows us our persistence. The city is gone, but we remember. The people are dead, but we mourn. The truth is hidden, but we keep searching. That searching matters. that refusal to forget, even when forgetting would be easier, even when the truth is uncomfortable or uncertain. That's what makes us human. Those 44 skeletons deserve better than to be footnotes in history. They deserve our curiosity, our respect, our determination to understand what happened to them. Whether they died in atomic fire or rising water, whether they were vaporized by unknown weapons or felled by prosaic disease, they lived, they mattered. They were people with names and faces and lives that meant something. And now, 4,000 years later, we're still trying to tell their story, still trying to solve the mystery of their end, still trying to learn from their fate. If that's not a testament to the power of human connection across time, nothing is. The ruins of Mohenjo-Daro still stand in the Sindh province of Pakistan, weathering slowly under the sun, yielding their secrets reluctantly to anyone brave or curious enough to ask. The 44 skeletons that started this whole mystery have largely disappeared, scattered to museum storage rooms or crumbled to dust, their final testimony lost to time and careless preservation. The vitrified stones remain, though, silent witnesses to extreme heat and mysterious destruction. And the questions persist. What happened here? How did these people die? Why was this city abandoned so suddenly and completely? We've examined the theories, we've weighed the evidence, we've considered explanations from the mundane to the extraordinary, and we're left, still, with uncertainty. Maybe that's appropriate. Maybe mysteries aren't meant to be solved, but to be wrestled with, to challenge our assumptions, to remind us how much we don't know. The ancient nuclear war theory remains tantalizing but unproven. The mainstream explanations remain unsatisfying and incomplete. The truth remains hidden, buried under 4,000 years of sand and speculation. But here's what we know for certain. Something happened at Mohenjo-Daro. Something devastating. Something that ended one of humanity as great early civilizations and left behind evidence strange enough to spawn theories and debates that persist to this day. The Mahabharata still describes weapons that sound disturbingly like atomic explosions. The vitrified materials still show exposure to extreme heat. The pattern of destruction still suggests a focused, explosive event. The skeletons, in the few photographs and reports that remain, still show people who died instantly, frozen in their final moments. And we still don't have a definitive answer that accounts for all of it. Recent archaeological work at Mohenjo-Daro has focused more on preservation than investigation. The site is slowly eroding, damaged by salt, water, and time. UNESCO has designated it a World Heritage Site, but resources for proper conservation are limited. The mysteries of Mohenjo-Daro are literally crumbling away before we can solve them. Some researchers continue to investigate using new technologies like ground-penetrating radar and satellite imaging to map structures that haven't been excavated. Others are attempting to use DNA analysis on the few remaining skeletal samples to understand who these people were and how they might have died. But the golden age of Mohenjo-Daro research may have passed. The early excavations, conducted before modern preservation techniques existed, destroyed as much as they revealed. Critical evidence was lost, contaminated, or scattered before anyone realized its importance. We may never know the complete truth about what happened there. The mystery might persist forever, one of those historical questions that haunts us precisely because we can't answer it with certainty. And maybe, in the end, that's the point. Mohenjo-Daro exists in the space between what we know and what we can imagine. It challenges our neat historical narratives. It suggests possibilities that make us uncomfortable. It refuses to fit into our categories. The people who dismiss the nuclear theory out of hand might be right, but they also might be demonstrating the same close-mindedness that has caused us to underestimate ancient civilizations repeatedly throughout history. We used to think the pyramids were built by slaves with primitive tools until evidence showed us otherwise. We thought ancient navigation was crude until we discovered sophisticated astronomical knowledge. We thought ancient surgery was butchery until we found evidence of successful trepanation and other advanced procedures. Again and again, we've been forced to revise upward our estimates of what ancient people could accomplish. Maybe we're making the same mistake with the Indus Valley Civilization, or maybe not. Maybe Mohenjo-Daro fell to something prosaic that we simply haven't identified yet because the evidence is incomplete. The truth is out there, somewhere, waiting, in the ruins, in the dust, in the fragments of pottery and the vitrified stones and the scattered bones. All we can do is keep looking, keep questioning, keep refusing to accept easy answers that don't quite fit, because those 44 people lying in the streets of an ancient city deserve that much from us. They deserve our curiosity. They deserve our determination to understand what happened to them. They deserve to have their story told, even if we can't agree on what that story is. Somewhere in Pakistan, the sun sets over the ruins of Mohenjo-Daro, just like it has for 4,000 years. The shadows lengthen across ancient streets. The wind whispers through empty buildings. And the mystery endures. Was it nuclear fire that fell from the sky that terrible day 4,000 years ago? Was it divine weapons unleashed in a war between ancient kingdoms? Was it something natural that we've simply never seen again? Or was it something else entirely? Something we haven't even considered yet? Something that would rewrite our understanding of the ancient world and our place in the long story of human civilization? The answer is there, buried under the weight of millennia, waiting for the right question, the right technology, the right insight to bring it to light. Until then, the mystery of Mohenjo-Daro remains unsolved. The skeletons lie silent, the vitrified stones keep their secrets, and we're left to wonder what really happened when an entire civilization vanished in an instant, leaving only ruins, radiation rumors, and stories of fire from the sky. What would you do if you were there in those final moments, not knowing what was coming? What would you think as the sky lit up brighter than the sun? What would be your last thought as the heat washed over you, as time froze, as everything you knew turned to ash and glass? The people of Mohenjo-Daro can't tell us, but their silence speaks volumes. Their mystery endures as a warning, a question, a challenge to everything we think we know. And somewhere out there, in other ruins, in other ancient sites, in other forgotten cities, there might be more evidence, more clues, more pieces of a puzzle that could change our entire understanding of human history. The mystery of Mohenjo-Daro isn't finished. It's just waiting for someone brave enough, curious enough, or crazy enough to ask the right questions and challenge the accepted answers. Maybe that someone is out there right now, reading an obscure archaeological report, noticing something everyone else missed, putting together pieces in a new way. Maybe the truth about ancient nuclear war, or ancient catastrophe, or ancient mysteries we can't even imagine is about to be revealed. Or maybe the mystery will persist forever, an unsolved riddle from the deep past, a reminder that history keeps its secrets close. Either way, Mohenjo-Daro stands as a testament to the fragility of civilization and the persistence of mystery. It challenges us. It haunts us. It refuses to be forgotten or explained away. And 4,000 years from now, if anyone's left to dig through our ruins, they might find themselves asking similar questions about us, creating similar theories, wondering what happened to the civilization that built such marvels and then vanished. The cycle continues. The mysteries persist, and the dead of Mohenjo-Daro still wait, patient as stone, for someone to finally tell their story right.